Hi, welcome to the replay of our webinar on the state's A through F accountability ratings for the 2025 school year. The webinar originally aired on August 26th, so any questions that you hear us answering are ones that came through live in the Q&A. Hope you enjoyed the replay and reach out to us if you have any questions. My name is Patrick Gill. I'm Good Reason Houston's Director of Research and Data Strategy. I've worked in education research in various capacities around Houston for several years and currently lead much of Good Reason Houston's research work. I'm excited to bring you today's webinar exploring how Houston area schools performed in the recent release of the state's A through F accountability ratings. One housekeeping item before we get started, we will have time for Q&A at the end of the webinar. So if you have any questions, please enter them into the Q&A and we will answer as many of them as we can. My colleagues on the research and data team will also be monitoring the Q&A throughout the webinar and may answer some questions in real time through the chat. So with that out of the way, let's jump in. Sorry about that. First, for those who may not be familiar with us or our work, who is Good Reason Houston? Through awareness building, original research, working directly with school districts, and public policy advocacy at the state and local level, Good Reason Houston connects the dots to ensure our pre-K-12 system sets every child from every neighborhood up with the knowledge, skills, and experience they need to enjoy long-term success. Our work is fundamentally oriented around our North Star goal of doubling the proportion of Houston region high school graduates earning a living wage in young adulthood. And we believe that public education is the key to achieving this ambitious goal. As I'm going through the webinar today, you'll hear me say Houston region a lot. And when I say that, what I'm talking about is what you see here. It's 11 Houston area school districts and all the public schools contained within their boundaries, including charter campuses. Combined, the more than 900 schools that comprise our region serve nearly 700,000 students, nearly 90% of whom are students of color, and more than 3/4 of whom come from economically disadvantaged backgrounds. So keep these numbers in mind as I'm going through the data today so that you have an idea of the scale that we're talking about. Together, these school districts are tasked with preparing the future of our region, and what they do today impacts all of us and our futures. I'm excited to be joined today by two of my colleagues, Kelly Thompson and Trista Bishop-Watt. Kelly is a director of district partnerships on our team. Prior to joining Good Reason Houston, she worked as an educator and administrator with YesPrep Public Schools for over a decade. She now works closely with districts throughout the region to improve their policy and practice to better serve our students. Trista is our director of government relations. She's a leading expert on education policy in the state of Texas and is frequently called to testify before the state legislature on a variety of topics. Kelly and Trista will be sharing about implications of this year's ratings for practice and policy, and I'm excited to have their perspectives and experience on today's webinar. So in today's webinar, I'll start by giving an overview of the accountability system and its history before jumping into the results for the region as a whole, and then highlighting a few specific districts that stood out, as well as some areas to keep an eye on in future ratings. Then we'll shift to considering the implications of this year's ratings for policy and practice before wrapping up with Q&A. So with all that aside, let's talk about the accountability rating system. Originally established through legislation in 2017, TEA first issued A through F accountability ratings for all public schools and districts in the state following the 2018-19 school year. Unfortunately, the year after that was the COVID-19 pandemic, which delayed the release of further ratings until the 2021-22 school year. And even in that year, given the academic after effects of the pandemic, schools only received official ratings if they received a C or higher. No schools received failing grades that year. TEA is legislatively required to refresh the ratings calculations every 5 years to increase rigor and raise standards. Following the 2022-23 school year, before ratings under the new system could be released, dozens of school districts across Texas sued the state to block the ratings release. This ongoing litigation delayed the release of the 2023 ratings until earlier this year. And in advance of the 2023-24 ratings, districts, fewer than before, but still numerous statewide, sued the state again, and their release too was delayed. But since then, all of the legal barriers have now been lifted. So finally, less than 2 weeks ago, TEA released both the 2023-24 and 2024-25 accountability ratings. So after not having ratings for multiple years, we now have 3 years of data to compare performance over time under the refreshed standards. And that's what we'll be talking about today. One final quick note, due to the refreshed rating system that started again with the 22-23 school year, it's really not appropriate to make comparisons to prior year's ratings. The calculations are just so different than before that we wouldn't really be making apples to apples comparisons. So in today's presentation, you won't be hear me talking about any trends in the ratings further back than the 22-23 school year. So what is the accountability rating system? The system provides an overall rating on an A through F scale across three domains: student achievement, school progress, and closing the gaps. The scoring system is what you'd expect when thinking about letter grades. Under 60 is an F, 60 to 69 is a D, 70 to 79 is a C, 80 to 89 is a B, and 90 and above is an A. The scores in all three domains are largely based on a school's or district's results on annual STAR exams. Domain 1 looks strictly at those STAR results. How well is a school or district doing at ensuring students are meeting state standards? For high schools, this domain also considers college, career, and military readiness, or CCMR, indicators. Domain 2 looks at those STAR results and tries to put them into context in one of two ways. The first is looking at student growth. Even if students aren't yet meeting standards, how much have they grown towards doing so over the past year? And the second way is relative performance. How well do your students perform compared to schools or districts with similar demographic profiles? In determining a school's or district's Domain 2 score, they get to take the higher of either their growth or relative performance scores. Finally, Domain 3 looks at the performance of lower and higher performing student groups within a campus or district and assesses the extent to which the gaps between those groups are closing. Schools and districts receive scores and letter grades in each of the domains separately, in addition to their overall score. And to calculate that overall A through F rating, TEA takes the higher of either Domain 1 or 2, which again is itself the higher of either growth or relative performance, and that counts for 70% of the school or district's overall score. Domain 3 accounts for the remaining 30%. Okay, so now that I've explained the rating system, let's see what this year's results showed. Overall, across the Houston region, the 2024-25 accountability ratings tell an incredible story. 145,000 more students attended an A or B rated campus last year than just 2 years prior in 2023. The proportion of students in A or B rated schools rose from less than half to 2/3. And the percent of students in the Houston region attending A or B rated campuses exceeded the statewide average and the average for other large urban districts around the state. I want to take a beat here and celebrate the hard work of our teachers, administrators, and district staff. The progress our region has made over the past 2 years is truly inspiring, and we at Good Reason Houston are excited to continue working together to push us even higher and ensure that all of our students have access to a high-quality public school. Looking deeper into the scores, we found that most of the gains were driven by increased Domain 2 and Domain 3 scores. We'll dive more deeply into that later. On the other side of the story, there are 27 campuses across 3 ISDs and some charter operators in our region that have 2 or more years of unacceptable D or F ratings. Campuses that receive 5 consecutive years of unacceptable ratings may trigger state interventions in their districts, so these campuses need our ongoing support to ensure they are providing students with the quality education they deserve. And finally, looking specifically at Houston ISD, Texas's largest district, which is now in its 3rd year of state intervention, more than 3/4 of students in the district's new education system, or NES, attended A or B rated campuses, a massive turnaround from just 6% in the 22-23 school year. So I'm going to spend the next several slides going over some big picture takeaways for the region before jumping into some more campus and district specific trends. First, if you don't take anything else away from this webinar, the one thing I want you to walk away knowing is that far more students in the Houston region attended A or B rated campuses in the 2024-25 school year than in the 2022-23 school year. You'll see several versions of these bar charts in the coming slides. These bars show the percentage of students attending schools at each rating level, not the percentage of schools receiving each rating. Students in A or B rated schools will be shown in teal, those in C rated schools in green, and those in D or F rated schools in pink. We prefer to keep these visuals student focused, which is why we show the percentage of students at each rating level rather than schools. So here you see that in 2023, less than half, 44% of our students attended A or B rated campuses. In 2025, that number was all the way up to 2/3, 67%. That's a 23-point gain in just 2 years. To put those numbers in perspective, that 23 percentage point gain represents nearly 145,000 additional students attending highly rated schools. At the same time, the proportion of students attending D or F rated campuses fell from 32% to just 12%. Our region's 2-year improvement in highly rated schools is more than double the statewide gain, and also exceeds the gains across other Texas urban districts by 5 percentage points. Many districts across our region showed remarkable improvement over the past 2 years, but I especially want to highlight the work happening at HISD and Aldine ISD. In HISD, the proportions of students attending A or B rated campuses jumped from just 33% in 2023 to 76% in 2025. Aldine ISD saw its proportion of students at D or F rated campuses fall from 71% in 2023 to just 21% in 2025. And Aldine didn't have a single F-rated campus in 2025. This map here shows how widespread this progress has been across our region. You can watch the transition from 2023 to 2024 to 2025 as the orange and pink campuses change to blue and teal. Those are all campuses that have shifted from being D or F rated to A and B rated schools in just 2 years. I mentioned before that the overall ratings are based on campuses' scores in the 3 domains, and that much of the progress we saw this year can be traced to our school's great performance in Domain 2. As a reminder, Domain 2 scores are based on the higher of either student growth or relative performance. You can see here that our region's Domain 2 scores are even higher than our overall scores. Fully 7 in 10 students attended schools rated A or B in Domain 2. These schools reflect the progress our schools have made in recent years, particularly in districts like HISD and Aldine ISD, and others like Galena Park and Pasadena ISDs. These districts' high Domain 2 scores reflect that these are all districts that have shown strong year-over-year growth and have diverse student populations from predominantly economically disadvantaged backgrounds. Our region's success in providing all students with opportunities to learn and grow can be a model for other districts around the country. Turning to Domain 3, closing the gaps, our region's 25 percentage point gain from 2023 to 2025 in students attending A or B rated campuses in Domain 3 was the highest 2-year change across any domain. And this increase, again, reflects our progress in closing performance gaps between higher and lower performing student groups within campuses and districts. Turning last to Domain 1 scores, we see some progress from 2023 to 2025, but less than in Domains 2 or 3. Recall that Domain 1 looks at unadjusted student achievement, and for high schools, CCMR indicators. While the proportion of students in schools rated D or F in Domain 1 fell 13 points since 2023, still over a quarter of our students attended D or F rated schools in this domain. Progress in this domain specifically is something we should be watching as we continue to see strong year-over-year student growth. If growth continues as we've seen in recent years, then we should start to see Domain 1 scores increase as more and more students perform at grade level. Finally, it's important to look at how A through F ratings differ across the region for different student groups. Our goal should be to ensure that all students, regardless of background or neighborhood, attend excellent public schools. Here we can see that while Black and Hispanic students remained less likely to attend A or B rated campuses in 2025 than their white or Asian peers, those gaps closed substantially. Notably, the proportion of Black students enrolled in D or F rated campuses dropped by more than half, from 42% in 2023 to 15% in 2025. We hope to continue to see this type of growth across all student groups in years to come. So now that we've looked at region-wide trends, I'm going to spend the next few slides looking at how different districts in our region performed and grew. It's important to keep in mind that A through F accountability ratings are largely based on schools' STAR scores. And when we look at region averages in STAR achievement and STAR growth from 2025, we see different stories across different districts. Some districts like Cy-Fair, Klein, and Spring Branch ISDs, along with charter operators like Yes Prep and Harmony, tend to have higher academic achievement than our region average, but tend to show less year-over-year growth. You can see those districts in the bottom left quadrant on this matrix. Other districts in the upper right, like Aldine, Channelview, Pasadena, and Sheldon ISDs, along with Houston Region KIPP campuses, tend to have higher than average growth, but lower than average achievement. Still more districts in the bottom right quadrant of the matrix have lower than average growth and lower. Only Galena Park ISD and HISD in the top left exceeded region averages in both growth and achievement last year. And when you look at A through F ratings across districts, these stories here largely play out. Here you can see the 2025 A through F ratings breakdown for the districts and large charter operators in our region, sorted by the proportion of students attending A or B rated campuses. Leading the way at the top, we see that School of Science and Technology, Galena Park ISD, and Klein ISD all had 95% or more of their students attending A or B rated campuses. Wow. Next, there's a strong contingent of districts within 50 to 90% of students attending A or B rated campuses. And within that group, the proportion of students in D or F rated campuses tends to be quite small. There are 8 districts or large charter operators with less than 50% of students enrolled in A or B rated campuses. But even within that group, there's significant variation. You can see towards the bottom that both Texas College Prep Academies and Sheldon ISD have no students enrolled in D or F rated campuses at all. In fact, Sheldon had among the region's largest drops in students attending D or F rated campuses from 2023 to 2025. from 39% 2 years ago to 0 today. So it's important to keep that variation in mind as you're looking at these numbers on this slide. I want to take a minute to highlight 5 districts in particular that all have at least 75% of their students attending A or B rated campuses. On the left, you can see that Klein, Galena Park, and Cy-Fair ISDs had 0 students enrolled in D or F rated campuses in 2025. And in all 3 districts, more than 80% of students attended A or B rated schools. That's incredible. Houston ISD saw its proportion of students attending D or F rated campuses fall from 45% in 2023 to just 9% in 2025, while at the same time more than doubling its share of students in A or B rated schools from 33% to 76%. I'll look more specifically at what's going on in HISD on the next slide. Channelview ISD also saw its share of students in A or B rated campuses double from 31% in 2023 to 75% in 2025. Channelview has been intentional in recent years on capitalizing on students' strong growth by building and strengthening its systems to expand access to advanced math pathways for high-performing students. Advanced math pathways have been found by Good Reason Houston and others to be strongly linked to positive long-term outcomes. As Channelview's students continue to show strong growth, more students will be able to access the advanced math pathways that they've intentionally built, and those students will be put on the path to long-term economic opportunity. Now let's talk about HISD. You've all seen the headlines. No F-rated campuses in 2025, huge increases in A and B rated campuses, especially at New Education System or NES schools. Putting those numbers in terms of students, we see that the proportion of students at D or F rated schools in NES fell from a staggering 88% in 2023 to just 5% today. That's an 83 percentage point drop. At the same time, the proportion of students in the proportion of NES students in A or B rated schools increased from just 6% 2 years ago to 74% in 2025. At non-NES schools, although there was no change in the 12% of students in D or F rated campuses, the proportion at A or B rated campuses did increase from 54 to 77%. As an education researcher, I want to emphasize how remarkable this turnaround is. You just simply don't see this in education. Usually we talk about gains of a few points here or a few points there from this or that initiative, but you never see anything this comprehensive. And understanding the strategies driving this improvement is critical to sustaining the district's long-term success. That's why Good Reason Houston is excited to announce a new original research initiative. Over the next year or so, we will be deeply studying the NES program, along with other school turnaround efforts throughout the state, to identify how these programs have impacted students in the short and long term. The overarching goal of this project will be to pinpoint what exactly about NES seems to be working most effectively to boost student learning, so that we can work together as a Houston community to ensure that those programs are maintained when the district returns to local control in the coming years. On the subject of state intervention and local control of school districts, the last thing I want to discuss is the potential of other campuses in our region to trigger the state laws requiring intervention in districts with chronically underperforming campuses. If any campus in a traditional ISD receives 5 consecutive years of unacceptable D or F ratings, the school's district is eligible for state intervention. Currently, there are 22 campuses across 3 districts in our region with 2 or more consecutive years of unacceptable ratings. Charter operators also have strict standards. If a campus receives 3 or more years of unacceptable ratings, the entire charter operator is at risk of losing its authorization from the state. There are 5 charter campuses in our region with 2 consecutive years of unacceptable ratings. These schools will need our continued focus and support to ensure that they provide all of their students with the quality education they deserve. So that was a lot of information. So I'm going to sum up what we discussed, and then we'll turn to talking about the implications that this year's ratings have for policy and practice. First, to restate our key takeaways. Districts across Houston, led by districts like Aldine ISD and HISD, made incredible progress this year. Far more students attended A or B rated campuses in the 2024-25 school year than just 2 years prior in the 2022-23 school year. And much of this improvement was seen in domains 2 and 3 of the rating system. We need to continue working to ensure that this growth is durable and translates into increased domain 1 scores. And that concludes the data portion of the webinar. I'd now like to welcome my colleague Trista Bishop-Watt, our Director of Government Relations, to the call to discuss how these ratings impact policy and to provide some updates on where our legislature stands on education issues today.
Thank you so much, Patrick. So, a lot to take away here from this data, a lot of progress and growth throughout the Houston region, and some areas where schools might need a little bit more support. At the end of the day, our A through F accountability system exists for a number of different reasons, but one of the main mechanisms here is to highlight bright spots where we have campuses and districts that are doing well so that we can learn from them and replicate those results in other areas, and also identify where we have campuses and districts that need some additional support. And so that's what I want to hone in on a little bit more right now. So we do have mechanisms in policy to be able to support campuses that are underperforming and need a little bit more in order to meet student needs. One of these is resource campuses. To be eligible, campuses with 3+ unacceptable ratings within the last 10 years can apply to be a resource campus and be designated by the state. The purpose of this is to support campuses in developing a comprehensive turnaround plan that uses the Accelerating Campus Excellence, or ACE model, that many of you have heard about or use in your districts. So that integrates proven strategies that have been used across the state to improve student growth and proficiency. That includes things like the teacher incentive allotment, which allows strategic placement of staffing so that our highest performing teachers are serving the highest needs students. Extended instructional time through the additional day school year, or ADSE, so that kids have more opportunities to learn. And finally, curriculum quality, high quality instructional materials. The state has done a lot of work to increase the quality of instructional materials in the way that we evaluate that. And all of these things are incorporated into resource campuses, into the ACE model. Importantly, the resource campus designation comes with the possibility of additional funding in order to support these research-backed strategies to support student growth. And last legislative session, House Bill 2 actually expanded the eligibility for resource campuses. So now D, F, and not rated campuses, along with middle schools, are eligible to be resource campuses. And many of the campuses in the Houston area that are needing the most support right now, based on this year's accountability ratings, are actually middle schools. So this is a meaningful adjustment in policy for our Houston area schools. On the next slide, there are some things that are coming down the pipeline in policy as well that will impact or potentially impact our accountability system. The first is, right now we're in the midst of a special legislative session, and that includes an agenda item to eliminate the STAR and replace it with an effective tool to assess student progress and assure district accountability. So there are two bills that are currently proposed, some main bills here on this particular issue, and they propose the next phase of assessment and accountability. Each of them would move the state to a through-year assessment model. This would allow for checkpoints at the beginning, middle, and end of year. They would ensure that ratings are consistently released on an annual basis, but also at the same time provide more advanced notice to districts and campuses about the metrics that are going to be used for that evaluation and for changes that might happen. And they also would study our college, career, and military readiness indicators and see how they align to post-secondary outcomes like job availability and wage attainment, to explore the opportunity to tier those indicators to increase the alignment for those pathways in K through 12 to post-secondary readiness. So I was hoping to have some hot off the press information about these bills today, but actually they are currently on the floor discussing HB 8. So keep an eye for future updates on where these bills stand with the legislature. The next issue is the 2027-2028 A through F accountability refresh. Every 5 years, the Texas Education Agency engages in a refresh process to make adjustments to the accountability system in order to drive continuous improvement. So the next refresh will go into effect for the 2027-2028 school year. The preliminary framework for that We are expecting to be released soon for public feedback, and as TEA goes through that feedback process, the final accountability manual will be adopted in fall 2026. So we expect that refresh process, just like the one that happened 5 years ago, to come with some potential changes to the A through F accountability system. And of course, we have our eye closely on what those changes might be, and we'll be sure to provide future updates as information becomes available. Now I'll turn it over to my colleague, Kelly Thompson, to provide some practice considerations.
Good afternoon. For this part for practice considerations, what we mean by this is thinking about what are those concrete actionable steps that districts can take to translate their A through F data into real school improvement. And we're going to be sharing some of the best practices that we've seen on the ground. The first thing that we'd like to share is a quality seats analysis. So what a quality seats analysis is, it's a way to look at your data to which you're looking at how you can use A through F ratings to understand the distribution of school quality across the district and to then identify both opportunities for improvement and innovation in your district. And we've seen this put into practice in a few ways. One of the ways that we've seen are under the System of Great Schools, which is a cohort of districts that's dedicated to increasing school quality. Here in the region, we have Houston, Aldine, and Spring that are a part of that cohort, and they regularly conduct this analysis to be able to look and see what are the things that we can implement, what are these actions that we can take, and what is our game plan to be able to work towards gaining some momentum in upcoming strategy. So based off of that, you're able to look at your data through multiple lenses. You're able to have at the district level, you're able to have multiple stakeholders to provide input in contextual layers to what is happening at the campuses and be on one page, kind of having like a one band, one sound in alignment to be able to make those decisions. And once you're able to have that type of analysis, you're able to move on to the second point here, where we've seen where based on these A through F ratings, districts should then consider, after looking at their data through these lenses, what are then the specific strategies and the actions to increase the number of A and B campuses and to decrease the number of DNF schools. And we've really seen this done successfully with a few districts. When it comes to implementing this type of work, we have like a huge shout out to Houston ISD and Aldine ISD for just their incredible commitment to bold action around school improvement. Both of these districts have consistently focused on implementing school actions and improvement models such as ACE to address their lowest performing campuses. Also, ways that you can use this in another vein, we've seen Alief ISD, who has used this data to understand the critical staffing implications at their high versus their low performing campuses. So once again, it's all about how we're looking at the data in order to determine those strategies and actions to get that improvement. And we can do that through multiple lenses. Finally, something else that we want to really highlight is the importance of leveraging your external supports. So districts can review and apply for aligned grant applications and opportunities through the LASSO grant. And that's TEA's annual Learning Acceleration Support Opportunity. This is an opportunity to where we've seen districts across the region have high success with curriculum implementation grants. We've seen Spring do that work. We've seen other districts implement new school models. Once again, Aldine ISD is another example where they've taken advantage of applying for these grants to implement some of the awesome school models they have. Also with the work that they've done with the ACE model at Goodman and Worsham and Caraway Elementary Schools, as well as Eisenhower 9. They've just done some really impeccable work when it comes to that and leveraging this outside external opportunity to help meet those goals and to get that achievement growth in those areas. If you would like any more information about like I would love to learn more about equality seats analysis, what it means to do more diligent work with annual school plans or LASSO grants. Please feel free to email our district partnership team at advisory@goodreasonhouston.org. And next, we're going to talk about one of the questions that we get often as a team is really trying to figure out um, what does Good Reason Houston partnership do? How can you all help us at district levels and ultimately to trickle down at campus levels to help us move the needle? So what we do as a district partnerships team is we act as a strategic partner to school districts. We provide guidance and support on strategies that both lead to greater outcomes for all students, and our approach is centered around three key areas. The first thing that we really dive in and help districts do is understanding their trends. We're just not providing raw data. We're analyzing the A through F ratings. We're looking at STAR achievement and growth. We're looking at student performance data in order to give districts a clear, nuanced picture of your district's specific strengths and what are those opportunities to take for the growth and achievement. Next, we help districts dive deeper and look deeper into their data. So the beauty of this is we really have an opportunity to help districts customize their analysis by integrating additional data points. So we know that student achievement is one piece of the narrative, and we know that sometimes we need to look at other pieces like enrollment trends, facility utilization, and teacher effectiveness to really truly have a comprehensive and actionable plan that goes beyond what a standard report might offer. So if you take a look here on the right side, these are just a few examples of some graphs that our team provides to help districts get deeper analysis. And then finally, we help districts guide your strategy. So it's one thing to we've analyzed the data. We now have a plan that's actionable. We help with the guidance of that. So our support has helped to design, identify crucial opportunities for district schools. And that's from targeted improvements at a single campus to designing brand new school models to better serve your communities and students and families. So we're here to partner with you and to provide data, insights, and strategic guidance as you all take these bold next steps. So once again, if mentioned, if you're like, this all sounds interesting, my interest is piqued, I have some more questions about any of the things named, please feel free to reach out to us. We can help with guidance on the upcoming LASSO grants, more about QSAs and annual school planning, and we look forward to partnering with you all soon.
Thanks, Kelly and Trista. So that concludes the content of our webinar. Thanks so much for joining us today. We're excited now to turn to Q&A. All three of us, myself, Kelly, and Trista, are here to answer questions. If you have questions about data or practice or policy, we can spend the next 10 or so minutes talking about it. I see that we've had a few that have already come in through the chat. So there's a question about HISD's results. Do we anticipate that HISD will see similar results next year? This is specifically related to HISD's very high Domain 2 growth scores and what the impacts that could be if the growth does come down. So I can't say what next year's ratings will show or what they will be, but I can say that I think this question gets back to the point I made earlier about the translation of Domain 2 into Domain 1 scores. To the question's point, HISD has shown, especially at NES schools, incredible Domain 2A growth scores over the past couple years. And at some point, those growth scores should translate into higher Domain 1 scores. As students continue growing, their achievement is by definition going up. So as Domain 2 scores have increased so much over the past couple of years, we hope to see that translate into higher Domain 1 scores. So even as growth naturally tapers off over time, hopefully a school's ratings will be maintained because they've reached the level of achievement that they can maintain and sustain to keep high domain one scores. And then there was a question about I'm curious about the broader community understanding of these ratings, both why they exist and how they're calculated, given how much attention is on HISD right now. So if I'm understanding that question correctly, I think it's related to like how much does the broader community understand about what's going on, and I think that's a really important question. I think the media, like the Chronicle, has done a pretty good job of covering what's happening in HISD and the ratings changes, and the district itself has tried really hard to like broadcast their success. But ultimately, I mean, that's why we have events. That's why we, Good Reason Houston, are hosting events like this, because we want folks from around the Houston community to tune in so that we can talk about how the ratings calculated. What do they represent? What does it mean for you as a teacher, as an administrator, as a parent? What does it mean about what's happening in your school? So hopefully through events like this, and then in partnership with districts and schools, we can expand that understanding within the community so they do understand that the incredible work that is happening in districts like Aldine and HISD and Galena Park and others is translating into results for students. And I see that there's a question about teachers' experiences, how we're incorporating teachers' experiences into our research and conclusions, and I will let Kelly take that question.
Sure. I know that I can speak to when working with districts with QSAs. One way that we incorporate teacher experiences is looking at some of the talent data. So looking at those cultural pieces. So looking how teachers respond to their end of year surveys, or like looking at from beginning to middle to end, and looking to see like if what trends are you seeing at either like the elementary compared to the middle to the high school levels. Really having some in-depth conversations to what can be contributing to these things. So those are ways that like we've been able to look culture wise to make those connections between the ratings and other things, and just being able to make some adjustments by incorporating that data and having those discussions.
Thanks, Kelly. See, we got a couple more questions. I think I can answer a couple more, and then it'll be about time to wrap. So, received a question about TEA guidance around comparing results year over year, and how districts should think about scores over time. I think that is really important to consider. Like we've mentioned, the scores, the rating system was refreshed for that 2022-23 school year. So, as far as Good Reason Houston is concerned, it's our policy that we're not going to compare results prior to those 2023 ratings to current day, because the rating calculations are just different. And the calculations today are more rigorous than they were previously. So it's not fair to districts or schools to compare, for example, their 2022 rating to their 2023 rating, because the formula used to calculate those ratings was just too different. And I think that's consistent with what TEA recommends as well, that as long as you are looking within each 5-year refresh period, that those are appropriate over time apples to apples comparisons. To Trista's point, we will be getting a new set of refresh standards for the 2028 ratings. And again, that will be like kind of that, just like the 2023 ratings represented a new baseline. The 2028 ratings that are going to be available, the formula will be available for public comment soon. Those will again represent a new baseline. Like that'll be starting again in terms of like that'll be year one, and then we can compare going forward. Also, a question about the sharp decline in student enrollment and teacher retention. I think these are critical questions that are not unique to Houston area districts or particular districts in our region. In particular, student enrollment has been declining since the COVID-19 pandemic in urban school districts across the country. This is a problem and a concern that you see in other large urban areas all over America. And it's something that school systems are going to have to grapple with about why are families leaving or choosing to opt out of the public system in the case that they are opting out of the public system. In many cases, they may be moving to other districts like suburban districts. And in other cases, it's simply a matter of there are fewer school-age children in the United States today than there were 10, 15 years ago. And that's just a reality that school systems have to grapple with and consider as they're making long-term decisions about budget and that kind of thing. And on the teacher retention side, again, this is not a concern unique to our districts in the region. This is in particular a particularly acute problem in Texas. There's a lot of work coming out of institutions like Texas Tech on the effects of the increased hiring of uncertified teachers around the state. Again, not just uniquely to the Houston region, but there's been a large expansion in the number of uncertified teachers in the classroom across the state. And we know that schools that students perform better when they are taught when they have a certified teacher in front of them. So that's again something that districts are going to have to consider. And the state actually recognized that this is really critical in this past legislative session. I don't remember the exact bill, but Trista can hop in and talk about it. But there was an effort at the state level to try to tackle this question head on.
That would be House Bill 2, Patrick.
Oh, right. All education stuff in this session was House Bill 2, as Trista keeps telling me. Yes. Yeah. So anyway, yes, try to get more, expand the number of certified teachers and incentivize districts to hire certified teachers. I see a question specifically about HISD and certified teachers and campus growth. And again, I'll reiterate that this is not just an HISD problem. I know the headlines in the Houston region because our attention is naturally on our largest school district. It is not just an HISD concern, it is a statewide concern, which is why the state legislature really tried to tackle that issue head on this past legislative session. But the data is pretty clear that students perform worse when they are taught by uncertified teachers. So it's something that we need to be thinking about and something that we need to consider.
And I'll just expand on that just a little bit from the legislative perspective. Again, as Patrick mentioned, House Bill 2 does include some mechanisms to support with teacher certification and otherwise support well-prepared teachers in our classrooms. And that does include phasing out uncertified teachers in core subjects. So that is part of the legislative effort to support well-prepared teachers, along with a lot of additional resources from the legislature to support pathways like residency programs and other ways for teachers to get some in-classroom experience before as part of their certification process.
Thanks, Trista. I think that I know we were slated to end at 12:45, so I think that about wraps up. I know there are some lingering questions in the chat, so we will go through those and we may respond to some of them in the follow-up that we send out with the recording of this webinar. We are thank you all for joining us. We're really excited to get to share this information with you, and we look forward to continuing to engage. And we are thrilled to be in this space with you. Thanks a lot. Bye. Thanks for watching the replay of our webinar from August 26th. If you want to sign up for future webinars, please visit our website at goodreasonhouston.org and sign up for our newsletters. Thanks a lot.